My name is Joya Aaron Thornton. I founded and I'm the national director of an organization by the name of the Faith Leaders of Color Coalition, or FLOC. We appreciate you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your heart. We appreciate those Memphians and also Tennesseans that directly want to confront the American capital punishment system. We know that it does not deter crime, it drains resources, and we're going to center this press conference on Tony Carruthers and why his case matters in Tennessee. We ask that press and others reserve all of your questions until the end. We have a very tight run of show, and we certainly appreciate the National Civil Rights Museum for creating this space for us. So we have multiple speakers from multiple backgrounds, impacted people, people here from multiple faiths. So we ask that you give your attention to them. We are here to also represent the Carruthers family and also lift up the victims, because we understand that everyone deserves justice at this moment, okay? All right, so not to belabor the hour anymore, I would like to call up Lucas Cameron Vaughn, who is the interim legal director for the ACLU of Tennessee.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for being here. My name is Lucas Cameron Vaughn. I am the interim legal director of the ACLU of Tennessee. On May 21st, the state of Tennessee's plans to execute Tony Carruthers, even though they refused to conduct forensic testing that could prove his innocence. The ACLU joined Tony's legal team to demand that this evidence be tested before Tennessee carries out an irreversible and wrongful execution. Right now, we do not know the most important fact in this case: who actually committed this crime. But I want to start by being very clear about what we do know. We know that there is no physical evidence that matches Tony. Investigators recovered fingerprints from the home where the victims were kidnapped in locations exactly where you would expect the kidnapper to have touched. None of those fingerprints match Tony. To this day, they remain unidentified. We know there's also DNA that was collected from the crime scene that does not match Tony and remains unidentified. There are additional items that have DNA on them that have never been tested at all. We know that the state's case at trial relied almost entirely on testimony from an informant who was secretly working with the state. We know this is one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions. We also know that this key informant later recanted his story. We know that jurors who sat on Tony's jury 30 years ago have said that they would not have voted for a death sentence if they knew the key witness was a paid informant or that there was DNA evidence that did not match Tony. And most importantly, we know that Tony's co-defendant later came forward and identified another individual as responsible for the crime, making clear that Tony was not involved. Yet the state has never compared the unidentified fingerprints or DNA to the person identified by the co-defendant. With everything that we do know, the question becomes, why are we not using the tools available to answer what we don't know? The evidence exists and the questions are obvious, but the state has refused to seek answers. In April, we filed a motion for DNA testing in the Tennessee Supreme Court. That court has clearly stated that all litigation involving individuals on death row must be heard there. But after we filed our request, the court sat on it for several weeks, wasting precious time before telling us that we were in the wrong place. We're now bringing that request to court right here in Shelby County, where we are once again asking for the DNA evidence to be tested. At the same time, we're also pursuing relief in federal court. On April 28th, the ACLU filed a Section 1983 lawsuit challenging the state's refusal to allow testing of the unidentified fingerprint evidence that does not match Tony. That lawsuit also challenges the court's refusal to consider the state's secret use of the paid informant and the statement from Tony's co-defendant exonerating him and identifying an alternative suspect. At its core, our case highlights the state's failure to live up to principles its lawmakers have already embraced. Some of you may remember that Tennessee lawmakers already recognized the importance of forensic testing in cases like this. In 2016, the legislature unanimously passed a law requiring the preservation of biological evidence in death penalty cases. Lawmakers understood that DNA and forensic evidence can play a critical role in uncovering wrongful convictions even years after the crime took place. But preservation alone is not enough. That law was meant to ensure that when questions arise, the evidence is available to answer them. It was meant to prevent exactly this kind of situation, where a person is facing imminent execution while critical evidence sits untested. Now is the moment for that law to mean something, for it to move from a promise on paper to a reality in practice. Evidence sitting on a shelf does not deliver justice, only testing does. We provided both the Tennessee state courts and the federal courts clear and legitimate reasons to pause this execution and order the DNA and fingerprint testing to take place before Tony is executed. The courts must allow this evidence to be tested before the state carries out an irreversible punishment. When the stakes are life and death, we do not have a second chance to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucas. Before I call up Rabbi Micah Greenstein, I would like to represent the organizations that are here: Just City, TADP, Flock, Micah, Decarcerate Memphis, 13th Liberation Village, the Shelby County District Association, which is a part of the Baptist Convention, Latino Memphis, Memphis for All, the Justice and Safety Alliance, the Memphis Catholics for Social Justice, the American Muslim Advisory Council, the Muslim Community of Memphis, and local activists. We are also very thankful and grateful to the Carter Malone Group for helping us host this event. And the NAACP. Thank you so much. We're going to call up Senior Rabbi Micah Greenstein of Temple Israel.
When the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made his final fateful visit here, he was en route to New York for Passover, not to drop the mic.
And Rabbi, use that mic. That's the mic for your sound. The one that just fell.
King was en route to New York to join his closest Jewish brother, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, at the rabbi's house for the Passover Freedom Seder that my tradition observes annually on April 7th, 1968. 1968, like 2026, was a difficult moment in time. Everyone was feeling weary, beaten down, and wanted to withdraw. Why get involved when there is no fighting this injustice? People asked. Because, Rabbi Heschel answered, in a democratic society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. In other words, before a wrongly sentenced man for capital punishment is put to death, we, all of us, are responsible for his execution. Were Tony Carruthers able to afford a lawyer at trial Instead of having to represent himself after 6 court-appointed attorneys were removed due to threats, he would still be presumed innocent and not be sitting in a jail for 32 years facing execution. It's not justice when the testing of DNA evidence for the accused has been denied, and when the only evidence to execute Mr. Carruthers is a paid jailhouse informant. How can we as Tennesseans allow the first person in nearly a century in Tennessee to be put to death after being forced to represent himself at trial? In my Jewish tradition, there exists not even one recorded case of punishment by death, despite the permission to do so in the Bible Christians, Muslims, and Jews share. Deuteronomy speaks of a rebellious child to be turned over to the elders of the city, who could then decide whether or not to impose the death penalty. The law was clear, but it was never carried out in all rabbinic literature. The rabbis erected so many legal roadblocks to capital punishment, it was virtually impossible to impose. In murder cases, circumstantial evidence was never admissible in court by the rabbis. Yet here in Tennessee, circumstantial evidence is the only flimsy and inadequate basis for the planned execution of Tony Carruthers. The Talmud declares that a court could be called murderous if it ordered the death penalty once in 70 years. Two of the most revered Jewish teachers of all, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, who lived in the time of the Romans, Roman torture, crucifixion, during and after the time of Jesus, they opposed the death penalty. Not because they were weak on the brutal Roman regime, but because when Scripture says, justice, justice shalt thou pursue, there are two justices in that sentence, because it means the pursuit of justice must be pursued in just ways. Instead of becoming the monster playing God, instead of cloaking themselves in the mantle of divine revelation like some politicians and religious leaders do in all of our faith traditions, the early rabbis knew how easy it was for atrocities to be enacted in the name of twisted justice and revealed truth. In closing, we are here to stop the state-sponsored execution of Tony Carruthers 2 weeks from tomorrow, because the punishment must fit the evidence and the proven crime, not the presumed guilt of a poor man unable to receive the justice new DNA evidence demands. We need more than God to help us. We need more than our prayers to help us. We need the governor and citizens of Tennessee to stop this travesty of justice. Thank you for listening. And now, our leader, Dr. Lillian Lammers.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lillian Lammers, and I'm the pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Memphis, which is just about a dozen blocks north of where we are right now. And I'm also a board member for the Tennessee Innocence Project. Now, the Tennessee Innocence Project does not, Tony Carruthers is not a client for the Innocence Project here in Tennessee. However, they have made comment on his case because the details of his case have an impact on innocence work everywhere. The Innocence Project here in Tennessee is one of the youngest state innocence projects in the nation, founded in just 2019, and has already successfully fought for and succeeded in winning exonerations for 10 individuals in this state who collectively have served over 300 years in prison for crimes they did not commit. Now, why am I talking about this when Tony Carruthers is not a client of the Tennessee Innocence Project? I am sharing that information because it reminds all of us that sometimes the systems of justice get it wrong. Tennessee continues to be one of only 27 states that authorize the death penalty, even though all of the data shows that it is not a deterrent for violent crime, and even though we know that sometimes the wrong people end up sitting on death row. There are many sound Christian objections to the use of the death penalty in any circumstances, particularly when this sentence goes against the very teachings of Christ, who said these words, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer." And we don't even know if Tony Carruthers is an evildoer because there is untested forensic evidence in this case. So I grieve that we live in a state that believes that justice and a moral correction is ever achieved by snuffing out the life of another. From a moral perspective and as a faith leader, I must insist that if this state continues to use the death penalty as a sentence for crimes, it should do so with the heaviest of burdens, the heaviest of hearts, and the strongest confidence that they have all the information relevant to a case. We should be sure, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that any person sentenced to the death penalty in this state is guilty of the crime of which they are convicted. Tony Carruthers has maintained his innocence since the beginning, knowing that there is DNA and fingerprint and other forensic evidence which would definitively prove his guilt or exonerate him. It is immoral, irresponsible, and careless to proceed with his execution. Scientific evidence is impartial. It reveals truth. And lastly, Tony Carruthers is a child of God. He is loved by God. He is loved by his family, some of whom are here. His life is sacred. His life matters. The death penalty implicates all of us collectively in his sentence. If you are a Tennessean, your name is attached to this case and how our state proceeds. As so, I urge you, all of you, from a moral standpoint and from a rational standpoint, to reach out to Governor Bill Lee's office and demand that this execution is stayed and that the evidence that we still have that has not yet been tested is tested. We owe that to Tony Carruthers, and we owe that to each other as Tennesseans. Thank you.
Thanks, Reverend Lillian. Imam Nabil.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know what to add to what's already been said. In Islam, there's an ayah in the Quran that says, "Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafs," whoever killed a soul inappropriately, without the right of it, which means the soul, eye for eye, كأنه قتل الناس جميعا, as if that individual have actually killed or wiped the entire humanity, the human race. And what's the reason for this? Is because we as individuals of the community, we as individuals who are living in this state of Tennessee, we were quiet about the injustice that happened or happening, or hopefully it will not happen actually in a little bit more than 2 weeks from now. So this is, from an Islamic standpoint, our Prophet ﷺ actually teaches us, is that we as human beings, we as individuals actually, we should really always stand up and speak up for the rights, especially for those who are poor and those who are in the weak and those who are destitute in the society. Just like any other religion, it's not really just, it's not a copyright. It's not really limited or only for the monotheistic tradition, but any tradition always going to speak for the innocent, and especially for those who cannot speak for their own selves. The Prophet ﷺ says, whoever sees injustice and doesn't speak against it, that's a mute shaitan, that's a mute Satan or devil. So if we stay quiet on all of this, then this means that we are really part of this satanic cult that's going on. And we know in the state of Tennessee, not too far away from here, you see the places and road marks for lynching. Lynching was the code name in the past for really putting people innocently and hanging them or lynching them and do all this. Just because you come now and you have a jury, but the jury that doesn't see the evidence, or the evidence have been hidden from the jury, then it is only right, and it's only the appropriate thing to do is that to go back. We as human beings, we make mistakes. Go back and look it up and see actually if you're going to do something as severe as something that you cannot retract it. Once death is there, it's only by the hands of God Almighty. Then we are not the people who can give life. And if we take it, if you're the means or the ways or the reason for taking it, this is not something for you that you can give back. So you have to make sure if something of this gravity is going to take place, you have to make sure that all the evidence is clear, not just circumstantial or ambiguous, or we're not sure of this or we're not sure of that. If there's any ambiguity, then the case, it should be out. It cannot really continue. So thus, as civilians, as people of the state of Tennessee, people who really stand up for justice for all, and as Dr. King said, justice denied, justice delayed is justice denied, and injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. So we cannot really just be quiet and allow for this to happen, because if it can happen now, it can happen later, and we'll continue this. And really, the concept of the idea of lynching will continue, even it's under the thing of saying that there is a jury. If the jury is not a jury of your peers, which means if you are like Tony Carruthers, Brother Carruthers, a male, African American, and Muslim, he got trifecta that is really against him. So this is really, a lot of racism and bias that happens against our brother. So I urge everybody to seek Governor Bill and call and sign the petition asking for at least retrial with all the evidence that's present for the case for our brother Carruthers. Thank you. And now Deacon Henry Littleton. I forgot to say I present the Muslim community AMAC.
Does this one work? I'm here to share some excerpts from a letter that was authored by the three bishops of Tennessee, Most Reverend Talley, Most Reverend Spalding, and Most Reverend Beckham. In the letter that was delivered to Governor Lee today, they write, "We write to respectfully urge you to grant clemency and halt the scheduled execution of Tony Carruthers. We do so first and foremost with the victims of his crimes in mind. We pray that their memory be honored with dignity and that their loved ones continue to find strength and peace that only love and mercy of our Father in heaven can provide. Nothing in this request minimizes the profound harm caused to this family. Rather, it reflects a careful consideration of whether execution is necessary or just in this case. Tennessee law envisions the death penalties for the most worst of the worst, yet when compared to other capital cases in our state, this case does not fall at the outermost extreme. While undeniably serious, this crime reflects a category of cases where many similarly situated defendants have received life sentences rather than death. This inconsistency underscores a broader concern. The death penalty is not applied in a uniform or reliably proportional manner. Moreover, the fact that Mr. Carruthers' accomplice received a life sentence further complicates the fairness of imposing the ultimate punishment here. As we have pointed out in our earlier letters, our own church teaching has evolved on the topic of the death penalty. Once it saw execution as a legal means to protect society from those who have committed grave crimes. The last four popes, beginning with St. John Paul II, continuing with the first American-born pope, Pope Leo XIV, have clearly stated and formally incorporated into our teaching that the death penalty is no longer necessary to protect society and is not permissible as a just punishment. A sentence of life without possible for parole ensures Mr. Carruthers will never be released while still holding him fully accountable. Such a sentence affirms justice without resorting to irresistible punishment. Mercy is not the absence of justice. It is a recognition of our shared humanity, even in the face of grave wrongdoing. Granting clemency will not ease the past, but it would reflect a commitment to measured, consistent, and humane justice. We ask you to consider commuting Mr. Carruthers' sentence to life without parole.
Thank you. It's good to be home. I see a lot of familiar faces out there and new faces that I've met through this process. My name is Joya Aaron Thornton. I'm the founder and national director of the Faith Leaders of Color Coalition, or FLOC as we are affectionately called by our pastors. Our network of more than 800 Black and Indigenous pastors and faith leaders are committed to confronting, interrogating, and dismantling the American capital punishment system with moral clarity. I am also a proud Memphian and graduate of Memphis Central High School, because I know that's important to Memphians, who is still deeply connected to the faith and justice communities organizing right here on the ground, so I'm never too far. I have come all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, to stand in solidarity with the ACLU, the Carruthers families, and others, and all who recognize that the application of the death penalty in Tennessee raises a profound scrutiny and urgent concerns. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, there have been more than 200 people exonerated from death row because of official misconduct, untested or mishandled evidence, false confessions, racial bias, and unreliable witness testimony. The case of Tony Von Carruthers includes many of the same concerns. For more than 30 years since I was a little bitty girl, he has remained on death row while serious inconsistencies have gone unaddressed. The prosecution's case relied almost entirely on 2 jailhouse informants and 1 paid career informant, which is widely known to be one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions. I have stood with families and legal teams across the South where very conservative governors have recognized that clemency should be extended, and it was their responsibility in cases where death penalty convictions remain. Governor Lee would not be alone if he decided to act now on Tony Carruthers' case. We know, Governor Lee, that you are a man of faith. So we appeal today to that faith. Listen to all of these voices who refuse to have blood on their hands in Tennessee. We also understand that there were real victims in this case. We want to recognize them, and we want to recognize their families. However, we cannot confidently say that Tony is responsible. They also deserve truth. The death penalty is outdated, it is deeply flawed, it does not deter crime, it drains public resources, and most critically, it risks the ultimate injustice of taking a life that cannot be restored. Thank you, guys. I would like to now call on Josh Spickler, the Executive Director of Just City.
Thank you, Joya. It's always a pleasure to stand with so many people for such a righteous cause in such a sacred space. So thank you for allowing Just City to be here today. Every day at Just City, we see firsthand the mistakes that the criminal justice system can make. In our work, we are in the courtrooms every day. We are paying bail. We are helping people get those records cleared, and we see the mistakes up close, and we see that this system is fundamentally broken. As Bryan Stevenson says, we have a system of justice in this country that treats you better if you're guilty and rich than if you're innocent and poor. And I think the case that you've heard described so completely already is a perfect example of that. A system that treats you better if you're guilty and rich than if you're innocent and poor. And I won't recount all the reasons that Tony Carruthers' case was handled the way it was, but I will point out Tony Carruthers was not a wealthy man. And you've heard the statistics about the death penalty in Tennessee. If Tony Carruthers is executed by this state, by us, he will be the 8th person executed under Governor Bill Lee. And so we stand in our call to the governor to commute this sentence, test this evidence. When we find mistakes at Just City, sometimes it means a few extra days in jail. Sometimes it means a few extra weeks before your record gets cleared. A mistake in a case like this is much, much graver, as we've discussed. And so with that in mind, I'm reminded of another Bryan Stevenson quote. Bryan Stevenson has some pretty profound things to say, as this institution has recognized in the past. He's a Freedom Award winner here. He says, the real question isn't whether people deserve to die. The real question isn't whether Tony Carruthers deserves to die. The real question is, do we deserve to kill? We've failed the victims in this case. We failed Tony Carruthers, who's maintained his innocence for 30 years. And every time we take a life in a hapless attempt to reconcile a senseless act of brutality, we fail each other. Our justice system has not proved Tony Carruthers' guilt. Time and time again, it has proved one thing and one thing only, and that's that we do not deserve to kill.
Vicki Terry, Executive Director of the NAACP Memphis branch. One must ask the question, why won't they run the testing for samples of DNA and fingerprints before they execute Tony Carruthers? Why? The clock is ticking. The clock is ticking, y'all. May 21st is the day the government has set for the execution of Tony Carruthers. From day one, he has pronounced his innocence. The state could potentially execute an innocent man. Doing the necessary due diligence to make sure they didn't convict the wrong person. Tell me why. Why won't they run DNA and samples of fingerprints? There is no evidence linking Mr. Carruthers to this crime. Did y'all know that? There's no evidence. His co-defendant told investigators that Tony was not involved and pointed to another man. Why? Why won't they run DNA and fingerprints? Tell me why. The NAACP, we are simply requesting that this is done. We are requesting that the fingerprint and DNA testing be done immediately. Time is of the essence. Thank you.
Hello again. I will be reading an abbreviated statement from Latino Memphis. Latino Memphis believes that every person deserves dignity, due process, and access to justice. We are deeply concerned by the state of Tennessee's plan to execute Tony Carruthers without conducting available forensic testing that is essential to prevent a wrongful execution. When due process is denied to one, it puts the safety of our entire community at risk. This is a reality in immigrant families we all know too well, especially right here in Memphis, where families are navigating systems that lack transparency, accountability, and fairness. We urge the state of Tennessee to pause this execution and conduct the necessary forensic testing. Real justice requires certainty, and critical questions remain unanswered. Latino Memphis stands in solidarity with the communities that have spoken and those impacted by unjust systems and remains committed to fairness, accountability, and the fundamental right to legal process for all. Now I'll call on William Arnold of Memphis for All.
Good afternoon. My name, my name is William Arnold, and I serve as the Director of Justice and Reentry Initiatives for Memphis for All, and also as the facilitator for the Justice and Safety Alliance. For 2,498 days, 2 hours, and 11 minutes, the state got it wrong. For 2,498 days, 2 hours, and 11 minutes, I knew what it meant to be a headline, to be a man wrongfully convicted right here in Tennessee. I know what it means when the system gets it wrong. I know what it's like to lose years that can never be returned, and I know what it means for a family to suffer alongside their loved one who's behind those walls. You see, when a person is wrongfully convicted, the punishment does not stop with them. It reaches mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, and communities who carry grief, stigma, financial hardship, and unanswered pain. Please, please know that a wrongful conviction damages more than a single life. It damages trust in the justice system itself, and it teaches communities to fear the very institutions that were meant to protect us. And when the death penalty is involved, the risk is irreversible. Because if the state makes a mistake, there is no healing that can restore a life taken. That is why what is happening to our brother Tony Carruthers is wrong. It's wrong. You heard the gentleman earlier quote Dr. Martin Luther King. This is an injustice. An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That is about what we are going to do today. So I'm asking from one human heart to another, please do not execute this man before truth has had its full chance to speak. Do not close the door forever when there is still doubt, still questions, still a life asking to be heard. Please, please give Tony Carruthers another opportunity to prove his innocence. Please, please give his family the chance to hold on to hope, and please give justice the chance to be justice. No family should lose a loved one. No person should be given the death penalty unnecessarily, and no state should rush to punish when truth still calls out to be heard. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Rafia Muhammad McCormick. I am a victims advocate across the state of Tennessee, as well as I work with Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty here, to end the death penalty in this state. And although we're doing a lot of work right now in Nashville regarding victims' rights and voting rights, I felt like I needed to make sure that I was here to let you know this could not happen in my name. I'm a mother who lost my own son, Rodney, to gun violence, July 9th of 2020. And since that loss, I have dedicated my life to ending violence, supporting victims, and ending the death penalty. I stand here today as a surviving family member of homicide loss. And because of that, I need to say something clearly. If this execution goes forward, it will not be happening in my name. You see, my pain should not be used to justify the taking of another life, especially this irreversible act when serious questions still remain. I understand the permanent impact of death, and I refuse to stay silent when another irreversible act is being considered. As someone who works closely with victims and survivors across this state, I can tell you this. Many of us are asking for healing. We're asking for support. We're asking for prevention. We're asking for accountability. We're asking for help to stay in our homes. We're asking to be able to pay our bills. What we're not asking for is an execution. Today, I join faith leaders, advocates, and impacted families in calling on Governor Lee not to carry out the execution of Tony Carruthers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone gathered here today to demand justice for Tony Carruthers. My name is Tyler Foster, and I serve as Vice President of the Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope, or MICA. From the beginning, Mr. Carruthers' case was tainted by deeply troubling misconduct by the state. The state's star witness, Alfredo Shaw, was a paid informant whose testimony was central to convicting Mr. Carruthers. Years later, Shaw recanted, publicly declaring that police and prosecutors coached him, paid him, and induced him to give false testimony. Critical information about Shaw's role as a paid informant was withheld from the jury and the defense. That alone should stop this execution in its tracks. But the problems with the case do not end there. There is no physical evidence connecting Tony Carruthers to this crime. Fingerprints recovered from the scene did not match Mr. Carruthers. Untested DNA evidence still sits on a shelf. That is evidence that could identify the real perpetrators or prove Mr. Carruthers' innocence. Mr. Carruthers' co-defendant has identified an alternative suspect, yet the state refuses to conduct the most basic forensic testing that any questionable investigation should require. Proceeding with this execution under these circumstances would be morally indefensible. It would not be justice. It would be a state-sanctioned killing built on concealed evidence, unreliable testimony, and unanswered questions. It would send a chilling message that preserving convictions is more important than protecting human life, that political convenience matters more than the truth, and that the state is willing to carry out an irreversible execution even under the shadow of serious doubt. That is wrong, deeply wrong. Tennessee still has time to do the right thing. Governor Lee and the courts must immediately order full DNA and fingerprint testing. They must address the documented misconduct in this case instead of rushing toward a killing that can never be undone. To Tony Carruthers, his family, and every person who has fought for truth and accountability in this case, Micah sees you. We stand with you, and we will not be silent. And to our elected leaders, grant the forensic testing, face the truth, have the courage to confront the misconduct surrounding this case instead of rushing to kill a possibly innocent person. Do not allow the state of Tennessee to carry out this execution that would be built on concealed evidence, unreliable testimony, and unanswered questions. Thank you. And I will now turn it over to the family of Mr. Tony Carruthers.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by acknowledging the families of Marcellus, Dolores, and little Fred Tucker. And I want them to know that I've been thinking about them every day for 32 years. I've had nightmares because of the false narratives that were told in the media, which have been recanted, not just by Alfredo Bernard Shaw, but also by the medical examiner, O.C. Smith. When he got on the stand and said that the victims were buried alive, he later recanted that and said he was wrong during post-conviction hearing for James Montgomery. There were a lot of false narratives that were told, not just the one, okay? It's more than one lie. I can't tell it all. It's been 32 years, y'all. 32 long years. And there's so many lies and rumors, and I hope that no one ever tells a lie about you that is so awful and terrible. I hope this never happens to you or anyone that you even know, because it's been a long 32 years. But to the Andersons, I want you to know that we love you all. We thank you for staying with us, even during the duplicity of the situation. And the duplicity is that we know them, they know us, we're related to them, and we love them. And they have shown that they love us. Even when other people in the community treated us as pariahs, the Andersons did not. And for that, we love you guys and we thank you. To the Tuckers, please know that we pray for you every day. We pray that you'll be comforted. And I cannot even imagine, as a mother or a father or uncle or a brother or a cousin, how I could sleep every night knowing what happened to little Fred Tucker. So please, I want the Andersons and the Tuckers to know that we love you, we pray for you every day, we think about you, and we have been for the last 32 years. Then, I want to quote some words from Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, "The time is always right to do what is right," emphasizing that moral action should never, ever be delayed. Guess what? The time was right to test those fingerprints and the DNA in 1994 when they discovered the bodies of Marcellus and Dolores and little Fred Tucker. The time was right to test the DNA during the trial in 1996 so that no one would have any ambiguity about what happened to Marcellus, Dolores, little Fred Tucker. The long suffering for the families of the victims and our family. Why? When we could have put this to rest 32 years ago, why? This quote by Martin Luther King underscores the principle that ethical action is not dependent on convenience or safety or social approval. It encourages everyone, you and me, to act according to their moral compass immediately. Because there's a long trail of a lot of people doing the wrong things for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's hard to do what's right when you face unpopularity, when you face scrutiny by others, and when you don't feel safe socially, right? And that happens on the job, that happens in our communities, it's happened in churches. It's a human phenomenon that we all have become accustomed to, unfortunately. The perfect moment may never come, but Dr. King used this idea during the civil rights movement to inspire everyone to stand against injustice, even when doing so was risky or unpopular. I'd rather be here talking about children and how they're getting scholarships to go to college, or how they improve their reading scores to like 3 grade levels above their grade level. That's what I'd rather be talking about. But unfortunately, due to the some corrupt law enforcement officials, and then some corrupt judicial officials. I'm here representing my brother. And by the way, my mom is with us. She's here today because if she were here, she'd be still fighting also for justice for my brother, Tony Carruthers. The time is always right to do what is right, Governor Lee. Moral action should never be delayed, and 32 years is way too long. Innocent until proven guilty. Never ever happened for my brother. That did not happen for him. I don't know if any of you are as old as I am, probably not, but he was proven guilty in the media before his case ever began. There's a gospel song that says, been lied on, cheated, talked about, mistreated. I hope that never happens to you, because you don't know how easy it is to be found guilty because of your association. He was friends with the convicted, admitted killer and the people who said that committed it with him, but he didn't do it. In 1994, I talked to him and I said, what is happening? He said, Tanya, I didn't do this. I was nowhere around. He said, I didn't even know it was going to happen. And he said, if he knew it was going to happen, he would have done everything he could to try to stop it. That is the brother I know. That is the brother who stood up for me when we were in the rough neighborhoods, who fought the neighborhood bullies on my behalf, on my little brother's behalf. That's my brother. That's the brother I know. I know he loved Marcellus. I know he loved Dolores. I know he would not do that to them, and I believe him. I believe him. A few more things. Before Dr. King was assassinated, he wanted to begin the Poor People's Campaign. And that campaign is so much more needed now than it was in the 60s. Racism and classism persists in our society. It's easier to find yourself, like someone mentioned earlier, on death row if you're innocent and poor than it is if you're guilty and rich. That is a cruel oxymoron to deliberate upon. And you know what? That really does not even cross racial boundaries of poor people. Does anyone remember the West Memphis 3? You remember that? When they charged, convicted 3 young men because they didn't fit the social mold of the small town across the river and called one of them a devil worshiper, put him on death row. It took the resources of a rock band to get him off death row to prove that he wasn't there. It can happen. It can really happen, and it has happened over and over again to poor people. So the Poor People's Campaign is greatly needed, especially now, more than it was in 1968. I'm almost finished. I want to end by saying, I want to repeat Micah chapter 6, verse 8. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly. This is a foundational ethical directive from the Bible, Micah 6:8, summarizing what is required for a life that is pleasing to God. It calls for fairness and systemic change, justice, active compassion and kindness, and a dependent, humble, single, solitary walk with the Lord. Governor Lee, I believe you are a man who has faith. And if that's the case, I'm begging you to act justly, love mercy, have kindness, and walk humbly with God. Do what is right. The time to do what is right is now. The time to do what is right was in 1994, again in 1996. Through all my brother's post-conviction hearings, the time to do what was right occurred. The time is especially to do what is right now. In my heart, just so you know, I do not believe my brother would murder Dolores, Marcellus, nor Fred Tucker. He told me he didn't have anything to do with it. He said he didn't even know it was going to happen. And if he knew it was going to happen, he would do everything he could to try to stop it. And I believe him. He's my Irish twin. We're 11 months apart, and we fight like cats and dogs. But we still love one another, and I believe him. Governor Lee, my brother is innocent. So everyone, please share and sign the petition to free Tony Von Carruthers. Not give him life without parole for a crime he didn't commit. Free him. I want to say thank you first to God Almighty for sending help when I thought there was no help. When I was beginning to plan a funeral, when I was praying to my God and on my knees in my closet because I didn't want to wake my husband. I want to thank you, Lord, for keeping me, for keeping my brother, for keeping my family, for keeping my nieces, my brother, friends, family, throughout these cousins, throughout these 32 years. We've been holding on for you, Tony. We're going to continue to hold on for you, and we're going to continue to fight for you for as long as we can. But before I go, I cannot resist saying thank you to Miss Suzanne Jackson, Maria, the Liberator, the Liberato, Joya Thornton, the ACLU, Miss Deidre Malone. I mean, help came from out of everywhere. It's been so overwhelming. The faith leaders, the Carter Malone Group, Rabbi Michael Greenstein, thank you so much. Reverend Dr. Lillian Lammers, thank you, ma'am. Pastor Andre Johnson, Imam Nabil Bayakli, thank you, sir. Deacon Henry Littleton, thank you so much. Joya Thornton and Flock, thank you. Josh Spickler with Just City, thank you so much. The representatives in Latino Memphis, thank you for all that you have done and said. William Arnold for Memphis for All and JSA, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Rafia Muhammad McCormick from the Tennesseans Against the Death Penalty, thank you. We thank you. All of us thank you. Tyler Foster from Micah, thank you, and your whole organization. We want to thank you, and I want to give an opportunity for anyone from my family to speak if they would like to say a few words or so. Okay, come on.
Good afternoon. My name is Early Story. I'm a former jailer. Worked at Shelby County Jail close to 20 years. Tony Carruthers contacted me in 2017. I knew that Alfredo Shaw was a confidential informant. He was the one that framed myself, another man in the audience, Bernard Kimmon, and another guy, and some civilians. I want to highlight that they mentioned that Carruthers had 6 lawyers. I had 7 or 8. And it's not even an affidavit of arrest on file. On November the 8th, 1999, I was in court, Division 3. And after the court, they had forced me to go to trial with a lawyer that worked for the very own Shelby County Sheriff Department, which I was an employee. While I was talking to this lawyer, I had a tape recorder. And while we were talking, this lawyer mentioned Alfredo Shaw. And he said that Alfredo Shaw had confessed to him that leadership working in the Shelby County Sheriff Department took him into a room and told him point blank that if he would not implicate me, Early Story, in my court case, which was coming up in 12, okay.
You have to cut it off.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, somebody implying that death gonna come to you if you don't testify need to be looked at, because they're doing a lot of bullying in Shelby County government, in the courts.
And before we go, we just want to make sure that we say thank you to Decarcerate Memphis, the 13th Liberation Village, Shelby County District Association Baptist Convention, Justice and Safety Alliance, the American Muslim Advisory Council, thank you, and the Muslim community of Memphis, thank you all so very much. Don Askew, thank you. The Breed Love Film Association, and also Zachary and Jeff for writing a most amazing song in support of my brother Tony Carruthers. We love each and every one of you all. Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask that all the speakers please come stand with me as we bring the call to action, and people of faith, please come stand as we do this. My name is Pastor Keith Caldwell. I pastor the historic Centenary United Methodist Church. I'm also the president of MICA, Memphis Interfaith Coalition for Action and Hope. So you've heard all the reasons that Mr. Tony Carruthers should not be executed by the state. We've learned that the evidence that the state has refused to test. We've learned that there were paid informants who have changed their stories along the way. And we've learned that there's uncertainty around Mr. Carruthers being the person who committed this crime. But most importantly, as people of faith, we do not want the state killing people on our behalf.
Right.
We don't think it's a function of the state to kill human beings. We say that while you are able to convict a human being, you cannot condemn a person to death and then execute them. So it is immoral, it is unethical, it is not something that we want the blood on our hands for. And as people of faith, we must speak. Dr. King, when he was here the year before, in 1967, when he finally spoke out against Vietnam, he said there comes a time when silence becomes betrayal. And when we are too silent, we betray our own hearts of what is right, of doing justice, of loving mercy, and walking humbly with God. So we do not want to be co-conspirators in this death. We're asking you to not execute Tony Carruthers. I want you to call Governor Bill Lee. The state has sat on evidence since 1994 for 32 years and refuses to bring forth the evidence. What is the problem that you would not bring forth new evidence? We always know when you learn better, we're supposed to do better. And we not do that only as individuals, but as the state. So we're asking you to call Governor Bill Lee. We're asking you to send emails to continue to communicate that we want this execution to stop. So this concludes the press conference, and thank you for coming out.